Welcome to From the Honeycomb podcast. I am your host, Katerina. Join me as we explore stories of fearless female entrepreneurs and inspiring women in architecture, construction, engineering, and beyond. Each episode is a captivating blend of topics that resonate with the soul. Whether you're here to learn more about entrepreneurship, architecture, holistic living, or just need a little extra inspiration, you've come to the right place. So sit back, relax, and let the buzz of positive energy spark your curiosity. I'm back. I hope I'm not too rusty. I did have to restart this podcast episode because I started going off on a tangent and just getting back to being comfortable in front of a microphone. It's been a minute. So thank you so much for your patience. I am really excited to be back after this hiatus. Things are going to be looking a little different. I know the last podcast episode I shared, I wasn't sure when I was going to come back, at what capacity. But I'm back and things are going to be a little different. There isn't going to be a podcast episode every Friday. It's going to be a podcast episode as things come up, as I want to share information about my business. I've got a few guests lined up coming up in the next few weeks, and I'm just going to be sprinkling episodes throughout the year. Still on Fridays, but it won't be a weekly podcast like it used to be. So there's definitely changes, but I'm really excited. This hiatus was something that I really, really needed. Not only were there some personal things happening, which I feel like there's always something happening, but I also wanted time to focus on my business. Also mentioned that there were some financial changes that came up. And so I had to readjust, reevaluate. I was also incredibly burnt out at the end of 2024. So here I am at the beginning of, I almost said 2025, but at the beginning of almost quarter two of 2025. So I'm excited. Today's episode, I did make some bullet point notes because I do want to update you on what's been happening entrepreneurially, what's been going on with the business, a little behind the scenes, that aspect, and just kind of bring you into the world of entrepreneurship and how I've been doing. If you're curious what I've been up to, I know in the video you'll see I have pink hair, so that's something that's new. That's been a very exciting little change. Kind of had some fun with my hairdresser. So got pink hair, shorter hair. So having some fun changes with that. And I do have some notes. So there's a lot of things I want to cover in today's episode. But before we begin, and before I begin updating you on everything that's been happening, let's take a moment to really ground down and think of something that we are grateful for in the present moment. I know it's been a moment since I've done this with you, so just take a moment right now to think about something that you are grateful for, whatever that may be. Something, large in your life, a person in your life, some big event, something you have going on, or maybe it's something very small, maybe it's, hey, I finally got those 5 minutes to scroll through social media today, or, I'm really grateful for Netflix, whatever it is. And by the way, this is not sponsored by Netflix in any way. But anyway, just whatever you are feeling grateful for in the present moment. And what I want to share with you that I'm really grateful for and I've been excited to share about on this podcast is I'm really grateful for the books that I am reading right now. I have hit this back to back phenomenal book after phenomenal book after phenomenal book, and I am just so excited about it. I have been reading so much, reading such great stories. The authors, just everything has been blowing me away. The writing, I have just been loving every book I've been reading. And I hope this streak doesn't change, but I've also been sharing these books on my book club. If you're part of my newsletter, my monthly newsletter, you'll know that each month I select a book. And the themes I've started to select with those books has to do with women stories, women empowerment. And so I'm really excited to be sharing these stories. And I have just hit this really great stride with phenomenal books. And I'm just really grateful for that. I grew up reading. I love reading books. I do skim a lot. I love skimming. But when it comes to enjoyment of reading a book, I really, really am grateful for the books that I have been reading. And I also want to say, of course, I'm reading on a Kindle. In case you're wondering, do I do paper copy or Kindle? I have been focusing on Kindle. There's been a few physical books that I have been reading over the last few months. They trickle in if I get, book exchanges, or I do want a hard copy of a book, or I've been gifted books. I do read those. I definitely have been leaning more towards the Kindle because my husband goes to bed before I do. And so I like to read a little bit later than he does. And the Kindle just provides, not too much light, and It's just easy to carry with travel, everything. And I've had this Kindle since about 2013. So this little Kindle is still kicking. So I am really just grateful for the books that I have been reading. Hi, it's me, Katerina. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to share with you something that can change the trajectory of your life. If you are ready to start your own architecture firm but are feeling overwhelmed by where to begin, I understand, because I felt the same way when I first embarked on my entrepreneurial journey. This is why I have created the ebook, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. This comprehensive workbook contains everything I wish I had known before starting my own firm. From building a solid business plan to creating your brand, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm offers a step-by-step guide tailored to your timeline, whether you're launching your firm today, next month, or in a few years. Dive into essential topics like financial planning, organization strategies, and how to secure your first client, all in one convenient resource. That's right, you don't have to spend hours researching. I have done that for you so you can focus on building your business. And that's not all. With your purchase, you'll also receive an exclusive meditation for business owners, mindfulness tips, a crystal guide for support, and gratitude exercises to help you stay focused and positive throughout your journey. Turn your dream of having your own firm into a reality with the Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. Click on the link in the show notes to get your copy today. Now, let's dive into the episode. All right, so it's the end of quarter one for 2025. Where are we at? How are we feeling? It's the first quarter of the year is done. I'm feeling pretty good, I would say. I had my list of goals for the year. Every quarter, I've made a list of goals. And then each month, I make a list of goals, kind of like a subcategory. And I have that on my board right next to my desk. So it says what my goals are for the quarter. And just looking at it now, so far, I've done half of my goals for quarter one. So what those goals are, I have how many projects I want to sign each quarter, how much income I want to make each quarter, and then some miscellaneous things. This quarter, I wanted to make sure I got my corporate filings done. So that was something that I did. And then underneath that, I have every month what my goals are. And I'm recording this at the end of March. I know the episode will come out April. So that means we're at the beginning of quarter two now. But I just wanted to look back. It is the end of March. So I have the time now to look back at quarter one, see how it went with business. And wanted to kind of, let you know in on the behind the scenes of what business has been like. Things were really interesting at the beginning of this year, I would have to say. It was definitely a slow start, a slower start than usual. And I've been talking with other architects, interior designers. I spoke with my financial advisor about this. And I said, there's something different about this year when I compare it to last year. So just a background on my business. If you're new to the podcast, I incorporated my company, Katerina Baranova Architecture, in February of 2023. I wasn't fully on my own until about June of 2023. So there was some time where I was still working 9 to 5. And then I switched. I was like, there's a whole podcast episode about it. I cannot remember off the top of my head which one it is right now. But if you go back to some of the old podcast episodes about entrepreneurship, I'll talk about that there. But I was let go. And then in June, I started my own, or I was already on my own. So I started my own business in February. Sorry, the dates are starting to kind of mix. Feels like it was so long ago. I can't believe it was only 2 years ago I incorporated. But as of June of 2023, fully on my own, working for myself. And so here we are, April 2025. Good, got all the years right. Had to make sure they were right in my mind, but got those right. So I feel like I'm still a young business, right? I just celebrated 2 years, and I've, really in June am I celebrating the official of being on my own in business. So I'm almost hitting that June date, but this second year, I've been able to compare it now to last year, to 2024, right? And so I've been kind of comparing. I have all my spreadsheets that track, how I've been getting clients, where I've been getting clients from, when have I been signing clients. I've also made a spreadsheet of proposals I've sent out. Why didn't I get the job? When did I get these proposals? Who did I get the references from? So that's something too, if you're in business and you're thinking about how do I keep track of that? How do I know if my business is doing well or not? I encourage you to start early on tracking, when did you get a client? How did you get the client? Maybe you didn't get the client. Why? And also, maybe the client was hesitant. Can you follow up with them in a few months? So kind of keeping track of that, I've started to really focus in on that. So I've been comparing how the start of this year compared to the start of last year. And even with talking to, like I said, the other architects, engineers, interior designers, my financial advisor, there's been a slow start to 2025. And I know it's great because my word of 2025 is slow down. So I wanted to slow down in many ways. I didn't want it to have such a huge impact, but here it is. It feels like it's having a real impact on business. But there's been a lot of other businesses, that have slowed down. And in my research, in my conversations, I'm constantly curious, right? Trying to learn, trying to understand why are things the way they are? How is other business owner approaching certain situations, certain things that have come up? I'm always curious to know how other business owners are approaching like hardships, challenges, when there's a dip in the economy. There's this word recession being thrown around again. Do not ask me what the definition of recession is, but there's so many little things that are happening. And I love having conversations with other business owners, regardless of if they're in the architecture business, construction business, just to learn. And so what I've learned from all of my conversations is, based on where we are, and this is for the United States, I am speaking for what we're feeling in the United States. And I'm also in California, in Orange County, in South Orange County, which is a little bit of a bubble, can be a bubble that sometimes when things affect the nation, we don't always feel it here in Southern California, especially South Orange County and along the coast. So very, very niche, really microclimate-esque of us here. But things that have really affected business one is the economy, right? So there has been a lot of changes economically that have been happening since we've had a new president. And that obviously has a kind of a shift and a change on business, how people are approaching business, how people are spending their money. There's also, and I don't want to get political in any ways, but the way the administration is handling certain economic decisions is a little bit more fast paced than it has been in the past. And I hope that was a diplomatic enough answer. And so in that sense, things have been kind of up and down. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows, what tomorrow is going to bring. And there's been this sense of uncertainty really lately. And so a lot of people are very cautious with the money that they are spending right now, especially on larger projects, larger things such as a remodel, a new construction. So those are things that I've noticed, and based off of my conversations, has been affecting, the design industry, the architecture industry, and as well as other industries as well. So people are very cautious with their money right now, which is really interesting. And another thing is there's also tariffs that are coming up. So tariffs on foreign products, which very interesting. I don't know how I did not know this, but most of our lumber in the United States comes from Canada. And so if our lumber is tariffed coming from Canada, that increases construction costs. Another reason people may be hesitant to start construction is knowing that their cost of materials is going up. Steel, we also get apparently a lot of steel from Canada as well. And so, all of a sudden there's price tags on things, that we weren't anticipating. And so it's been really hard. I know a few clients have asked me recently, what do you think construction is going to cost for this project? And I personally don't like to give even a ballpark, maybe a cost per square foot, depending on past projects I know or the area we're working in, or if I know statistically I've heard some information. But at this point in time, I don't know how you can say how much you think a project is going to cost a year from now, especially with all of these changes economically with the tariffs. And so there's also been, on another note, kind of focusing on the theme of economy, there's also been the discussion of layoffs, right? There's been a lot of layoffs in private sector, in public sector. And so a lot of people in that sense, may not know are they going to have a job tomorrow? Can they invest their money into such a large project for, when I'm thinking about construction? So that is a big reason why it has felt like a slowdown for me personally. But that's, of course, this is just based off the conversations I've had and what has happened to me. So for me, I have definitely felt it. I think there was a bit of a slowdown at the end of last summer. We were waiting on the election results in November. Once the election results came in, there was a little bit of okay, here we go. Like some people were, whatever their thoughts were, where their investments were like, okay, let's get started. Sent out a few proposals at the end of last year. And then with the holidays, it kind of slowed down. And then with the new administration coming in January, there has been a real little like slowdown. Things aren't picking up until probably mid-January is what I've noticed. At least I have this year and last year to go off of, at least this part of the year. Once we get to June, I'll know a little bit more because then I can tie in my 2023, statistics and notes I've been taking. But it's definitely felt like a huge slowdown. And it's been a slowdown from a lot of people that I've talked to in commercial, residential, multifamily. It all kind of depends. But there's been an interesting, slowdown, which, like I said, is my word of the year. So it's interesting that that's kind of on point, on theme with what's been happening. So that's been kind of that overarching theme, really. This first quarter is just a slowdown. And I've finally, in March, have felt things picking up. And that's been really reassuring, But one thing I've also noticed is clients have been very hesitant, very, very hesitant when it comes to signing up a project. Could be for all of the reasons I just said. And typically when, for the last year and a half, whenever I met with clients, we would sit down, we have a meeting, we'd review the project, I'd put together a proposal, and then I'd hear back from the clients within, a week or so. Hey, we'd like to move forward. Yes, no. If yes, I would draft up my contract. And that process from our initial meeting to probably when the contract is drafted took no more than a month. But recently I've been seeing clients with that hesitation are taking time to review. Hey, actually, we'd like to think about it. Or, great, I got this number. I want to know how much it's going to cost before I make any more decisions. So that's been something that I've been really noticing. If you're a business owner who resonates with this, please let me know. If you're a business owner who doesn't resonate with this, or you are in the field of architecture construction, I'd be curious. Like, DM me on Instagram at From the Honeycomb Podcast, or you can send me an email at honeycomb, or what is my email? I have to think about that. honeybeeblog@gmail.com. There's links in the show notes how you can contact me, but let me know if you're experiencing this. I'm really curious, what your thoughts are, but this is what I felt as the owner of my own business. Now, another big thing that occurred at the beginning of this year is the Los Angeles fires. And although I am in Orange County, which is just south of Los Angeles, we were not impacted from the fires. We were impacted from the aftermath of the fires. A lot of people coming to Orange County, especially those who lost their homes, they were either coming down to Orange County, renting homes, things like that, or those who wanted to just get out of LA, right? Because the air quality was bad, the water quality was bad. So a lot of people came to Orange County. So we were impacted in that ways where there was a lot more people around, it felt like. But we weren't impacted in the sense that we were safe. But the LA fires had a huge impact on how I approach my designs. I work mostly in Laguna Beach, the city of Laguna Beach, where 97% of the city is in some sort of fire zone. There's also a high fire severity zone. And so a lot of the projects that I work on, I have to think about fire mitigation systems. What is the design? How is that going to be impacted by fire? Of course, there's the building code requirements, fire code requirements. The city of Laguna Beach has its own requirements when it comes to fire prevention in design. And so I had to take a look back at all of my projects, though, and and I think I talked about this in the last episode that I was talking about, what that all meant for my projects. And that still has trickled into even March, and I'm starting to be impacted. Some of my projects are starting to be impacted by what is happening in Los Angeles. For example, I had to have asbestos testing for a project before we pulled the permit. And unfortunately, all the asbestos and abatement places were just swamped because they started doing the demolition in Altadena and the Pacific Palisades. And especially in Altadena, where a lot of the homes are older, they had to do asbestos testing before doing the demo and removal and abatement. So they were swamped. So there was a delay for us in how long that took. So that kind of gives you an idea of how it's starting to trickle in the LA fires into even me in Orange County. It started to affect, business in a sense, not my business, but my projects, right? So there's the LA fires, the economy has just felt really slow. So that's something just kind of want to talk about, overview of what's been happening, what I have been, talking with others, looking at with just even talking to realtors, just anybody I can talk to. That's kind of just what I wanted to share on that sense. So personally, how has quarter one been going? Personally, quarter one for me from a business aspect, it was slow until about this month. Things have started to pick up, which was really interesting on how I was going to react to that slowdown in January and February, right? I had wanted this word of slow down to be my theme of 2025. But then when reality hit and I really was slow, I thought, okay, am I going to be freaking out? Because obviously, things are also getting more expensive. I think eggs right now, we went and bought eggs, they were like $11. Things are really expensive right now. So, of course, you need money, income to be able to even just have a roof over our heads, be able to buy eggs, which I like to have every morning with breakfast. So, you got to make money, right? Girls got to eat. So I was really worried about how business was going to be with such a slowness. And I talked about this in my newsletter. I'm only going to briefly talk about it here because this is the platform that reaches a larger mass or a larger group of people than my newsletter does. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter, there's a link in the show notes. But I had to let a client go, one that was not aligned with me. And that was a very hard decision because given the situation, and I can't really talk about the situation either, there's a lot to it, but if you read my newsletter, you know what happened. I had to let this client go. And that was really hard because as a business owner, when I am looking at the projects I have, the income that's coming through, and there is a problem client that I have to evaluate, is this worth the way I'm being treated? Is this the worth, the money I'm getting for this project? Is it all worth it? The energy I'm taking on, all of that. And at the end of the day, I made the decision it was not worth it. I had to let the client go. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I'd ever made. Letting go of that client allowed me to bring in space for a new client. And a few weeks later, I was signing a client. I've signed a client who is incredible. I just so enjoy working with them. And I'm just so happy with all of the clients I have right now and everybody I'm working with and all the projects. And it's just, that's been really exciting. On another end of, the timing of all my projects and schedules, some of my projects were held up in city processing. Now, if you are in the industry, in the architecture world, especially if you work with small cities, small towns, how to be diplomatic about this one. It's slow. There's bureaucracy at work, right? And unfortunately, city processing is very slow in one of the cities I work in. Such a problem that there's been multiple meetings with the city about, how can we make city processing faster for architects, for designers? Let's get more construction going. Let's get things approved faster, et cetera, et cetera. And so on that sense, that's been really interesting because so many of my projects slow down over the holidays. And then I had about 3 projects that I was just sitting and waiting on. We had been approved for 2 of them, and I was just sitting waiting to get to the next step, but I couldn't get to the next step because the city was re-reviewing or doing their administration, or I don't know what they were doing. And so that was something that was really hard for me to work out as well. And just looking at this already, this second year of business, from June all the way to now, there have been some really interesting challenges in my business. There was the potential lawsuit, right? There's been having to let a client go. That was the first experience of mine. There's been a lot of new changes in the second year of business that have really made me grow as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as an architect, as an individual. It's been really interesting to see how much of what I am learning through my business is shaping me and changing me on a personal level as well. So that's been really interesting to kind of follow. There's been, decisions I've had to make that have been uncomfortable for, let's say, in my, it's only me right now still in my company. One of the things that my goal is this year is to delegate more work out. At the moment, what I have, the workload I have, I'm able to take on because of where I work and how I work. I'm still able to, which I love the process. And I've also had to build my processes, to be able to bring someone on. So that's my goal this year, is to bring someone on. And not as an employee, because if in the state of California, there's so many employee requirements. If you are a business owner, oh my gosh. So they will be a 1099 consultant most likely. But anyway, I don't know when that's happening. That is in the process. That's a whole nother process, but I don't want to get on a tangent too. And then who knows, something else could happen and I could be working with someone next week so that I need to work with. But right now, my workload, I can sustain the workload that I have. And, of course, I've had to let certain things go that just had to free up my space. For example, this podcast. Also, we need to talk about that. What it's been like not podcasting, which, okay, I don't want to tangent, but we will get to that. But yeah, so back to the business, delegating and the workload I have. And so that's right. There's been decisions I've had to make, excuse the tangent. There's decisions I've had to make as like the CEO of my company that have not made my architecture department happy, me being the architecture department as well. There's decisions I've made in the architecture department that have not made my business CEO, office manager, me as well, wearing a different hat, have not made me happy. And that's been something that's been really interesting to navigate as a business owner, is making decisions that don't always align with what you want for a different department of yours to do. And so that's, like I said, that's been really interesting to follow, to understand, and just see, and see, like, I want my business to grow, and then in what aspects and how do I have that business grow? So it's been interesting. It's a work in progress. I feel like any business owner knows it's always a work in progress. And I know I am still so young that I still have a lot of growth, still a lot of like growing pains. I'm still learning so much, but already in the second year, I've had more growth, I believe, than in my first year of business, which is really interesting because you would think in your first year of business, I had to learn everything, right? From like, how do I send out a proposal? How am I going to do this? All these decisions on just getting started for a business. But the second year, the challenges that have come up, the client issues, the client relations, design issues, city processing, managing all of that, there's been so much growth the second year already. And I'm almost to June, and it's been really interesting to see. So that's been that on the business. Now let's talk about not having a podcast. Well, that was interesting. I will say, I think the last episode that I had air was probably at the beginning of February. So really I've had almost 2 months of not podcasting. I mean, the last few episodes I recorded, I think was in January. And then I had the one podcast episode go out in February. And then it's been really silent, right? And then I took a total break off of social media. I don't think I posted for like a month and a half or so on social media. And that was really rejuvenating. It was really something I really needed. There was a lot of reflection on a personal level of some things that were happening that I needed this time away from social media. And also, it's amazing how much time freed up that I wasn't spending on social media or that I wasn't spending on working on the podcast. And in a way, it was such a relief not having to show up every Friday for, Happy Podcast Friday, Instagram stories, things like that. I felt like I was in such a creative rut too. I just didn't have the inspiration to work on creativity, coming up with guest episodes. I also, now that some time has passed, oh my gosh, at the beginning of this year and at the end of last year, I tried to schedule so many interviews and had so many last minute cancellations or changes that just drove me insane. I'm a very organized person. I like to show up at certain when things are scheduled. If I cancel something very last minute, there is a damn good reason on why I'm canceling or rescheduling, like there is. And so that was really frustrating as well, where I was having these coordination issues and people were changing stuff at the last minute. And I thought, okay, well, if you're not making this a priority to come on the podcast, something you've agreed to, I'm not forcing you to come on here. But if you're not making that a priority, I'm not going to prioritize your interview anymore. You're not giving it the same, level of attention that I'm giving it. And so, sorry, you're not coming on the podcast anymore. So that was something there was a lot of boundary cutting at the beginning of January where I was like saying no to a lot of things, end of last year, that too. And that has just made me feel so much more at peace now that we are here at the end of March, going into April. And, yes, I've really missed the podcast in some ways. In some ways, there's a lot that I don't miss. The things that I miss the most is connecting with other women, connecting with my guests, connecting with you, the audience, just being able to create episodes that you resonate with, having conversations that are so fascinating, so meaningful. That's why the people I'm now having on, the people that I will be interviewing, the guests that I cannot wait to share with you, I already have 2 confirmations that I'm so excited about. I want to bring you the good stuff. I want to bring you quality over quantity. I want you to just be so excited when you see an episode drop. Be like, this is going to be such a good episode. I'm going to learn so much. I'm going to really get some depth out of this. I'm going to really, savor this. So that's what I'm working on. Like I said, I'm excited. Already got some guests in line, but I'm also going to be very mindful of when these episodes air. It's not going to be dropping them one week every week. think it just becomes too much. There's already so much information you guys are listening to, you're downloading. I want you to be excited about this. I want it to be a treat, So there's that quality over quantity. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, the things that I did miss about the podcast episode is marketing it. It's like my least favorite part of it's the Happy Podcast Friday and I know I can outsource this. I know if you're listening, you're like, well, Katerina, just outsource it. Yes, I could outsource it. Financially, at the end of last year, it wasn't even making sense for me to outsource it. There's been a little bit of finances are a little bit in order, things like that, taxes covered, paid. So that's all been dealt with. So now I kind of have an idea of, okay, where can I spend my money? And at the end of the day, I do enjoy it. The podcast doesn't take too much time, but I do have free weekends now. Like I've been thinking about when am I going to edit this podcast episode and get all of that together. But I'm not as stressed about it now because I don't have to post every week. So I've missed the podcast a lot. I've really missed connecting with you. I hope you've missed me in your ears. I've really, really needed this. I've been having episodes air since almost every week since October of 2021. Oh my gosh, yeah. It was right after we got married, October of 2021. And here we are, March of 2025. There's so many episodes. I think this is the 159th episode or what? So there's so much content out there. I needed this break, and I encourage you, and hopefully I've inspired you. If you are feeling like you are in this rat race and you're just like, oh my gosh, I have to post this, I have to do this, I have to keep doing. If you just take a break, just take a step back, take that hiatus from whatever it is that's stressing you out, as long as you can, right? Every situation is different. Everything is different. Of course, I would love to take a 6-month vacation from just like life at the moment, but that's not happening. I'd just love to just be in Costa Rica for the next 6 months, but not there yet. Manifestation to be able to do that in the future, but I got to work hard right now to get there. But if you are struggling and you're like, oh, if I take a break, what would happen? Honestly, just do it. Just fucking do it. Honestly, I have so much enjoyed this hiatus, and I was really worried about what would happen. Then I thought, well, what if I never come back to the podcast? That was a thought. But no, I'm back. I'm back on my own terms, differently, in less of a hustle mode. And that has allowed me to just feel more relaxed, right? Feel like I keep thinking about the quality over quantity. That's where I'm aiming. That's where I'm going towards. I want the quality over quantity. So I hope this podcast episode was of quality for you. Thank you all so much for joining into today's podcast episode. Whew, still a little rusty there. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode because it's been good, This has been really good being in front of a microphone and in front of the camera, the lights, action, everything. It's been good to be back, and I'm excited for what's to come. I'm excited for where the podcast is going to go this year, There's still I'm still thinking how is the anniversary podcast episode going to go in end of September? And then am I doing a Woman in Architecture series in October? There's so many things I'm still thinking about and how I want to do them, but I'm giving myself the grace to move through those decisions so that they serve me in the way that they need to. And that's something I hope that you can take from this episode, hearing, my experience of taking that break, taking that hiatus, and it served me really well. And I'm really excited to jump back into podcasting. So let's see where the rest of the year takes us. And here we go, Q2 of 2025. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to rate, review, and share it with your friends. To stay connected, follow me on Instagram at From the Honeycomb podcast, and you can support the podcast through the Patreon link in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to my monthly newsletter where I share exclusive behind-the-scene content and tips on running a mindful and successful architecture business. Thank you again for listening, and stay curious.